Hey guys, this is Fred from Prettyfly Games, and today we're going to continue with our top-down car controller built in Unity. In this episode we're going to add things requested from our Patreon supporters. So we're going to add drivers with unique names that drives unique cars. We're also going to remember the position that a car finished at, so it starts at that position when a new race starts. We're also going to add support for championship points, and we're also going to count laps in our UI. So let's get started. To implement most of these new features, we will introduce a new class. And so let's go into scripts and let's create a new folder. And we'll call it driver. And we will create a new class that will contain all of this information, and we will call it driver info. And let's open that in Visual Studio. Our new class will just hold the information, so it doesn't need to be a mono behavior. So let's get rid of all of those functions. And we will do it in a sort of very fast manner. So it will be a public class, and the information will be public variables. Normally you would probably hide these and have them as private, and then use the get set features of programming to ensure that nobody can manipulate this. But for now we are just gonna add it as public variables. So the first thing we need to keep track of is the player number. Which player is this? And then we want to have some additional information. We wanted to know the player name, and we also want to know what car are they driving. So we need to have our car unique ID as an integer, and we also want to know if it's an AI driver or if it's a human driver. So we'll have a is AI. And then we want to keep track of the player's last position, so that we know that, okay, if they have finished first in the last race, then they should start in the first position. So we'll add a last race position, and then we wanted to have the ability to calculate championship points. So let's add that as an integer championship points. Then when we are instantiating, or not instantiating, when we are creating this class and using it, then we want to have a easy method. So let's create let's get rid of that. So let's do a public driver info, and when this is the constructor, so when we are creating a new instance of this class, we will use this to populate that information. And then we just need to assign this information that we have received. So we're taking in player number, name, car unique ID, is AI. The other parts we're setting them directly later on. So let's just store these. So we'll do this dot player number is equal to player number. So that will store these variables up here. Perfect. So let's save that. Then we want to start using this, and our game manager is the place where we are tracking information that should remain active during scene changes, etc. So we will add our information here. So let's do a driver information list, driver info. We'll call it driver info list and create it as a new list. To be able to use this in an easy manner, we're going to supply some dummy data. So we'll add a driver info to list, and we'll do a new driver info, and we'll supply the player number 1, and we'll call it player 1, and it will have car unique ID 0, and it's not an AI driver. The reason why we're adding this is because we want to be able to test different courses, and how it will work later on is that when the player is selecting the car that they're driving, this information will be populated. But for now we need this to be able to test things as well. Then to use this information, we will start to use it in our spawn cars handler. So in our spawn cars handler, we are getting the information from player prefs. So we're not going to do that anymore. Rather, we're going to use our list that we have created with driver information. So first of all, we want to get a copy of this list. So we'll call it driver info list, which is a local variable here, and we'll make a new list, driver info, and we'll take the game manager's instance, and we need to get the driver list because it's not a public variable here. So we need to supply a method called get, well, the same name that we have here, get driver list. So let's find a suitable place where we have that, not any of the events. So let's do a list, and then we have driver info and the function name, and then we'll return driver info list. Okay, so now we have resolved that error. Oh, sorry, we need to make it public as well. Okay, so now we can get that, and we're getting a copy of the list. So we're not getting the actual list, but rather a copy. And the reason why we're doing it this way is because we're going to manipulate the list later on. So if we look at our code here, we are going through all the spawn points, which is fine. And here we are getting our selected car ID from player prefs. So that's not what we want to do. But before we do anything, we want to check if there is anything in the list. If there's nothing in the list, then we can't do anything, and then we will return. And we will also use this as a way of exiting if there are more spawn points than there are drivers. Right, so let's get rid of this code here. And we will take our driver info, and we will say that, okay, driver information info is the first item of our list. So whatever is at the top of our list, we're going to take that. And then we needed to figure out, okay, what's our selected car ID. So let's do that. Selected car ID is the driver info car unique ID. And then we can replace it here with player selected car ID with selected car ID instead. All right. And then we are going through this car data until we have found that car, and then we are instantiating the car, which is fine. And then we have player number, which we are taking i+1. So we're not going to do that either. We are going to take this information directly from our driver info. So for now, let's just get rid of this because it's not important. We'll replace that part of the code. Then we also wanted to be able to name the drivers. So let's take our car name and change that to driverinfo.name instead. And then we want to assign our car input handler and assign that to the correct driver or the correct player ID or player number. So let's do car get component car input handler player number, and we'll assign the player number here. Okay, perfect. And then we have some method of checking if the car is AI or not using player prefs. So once again, let's replace that with our information that we have. Driver info is AI. In that case, we are doing the same thing. And if it's a player, we're as well doing the same thing. And then we will, when we have finished our spawning of the car here, and we are going to then loop around again. But if we would loop now, we would come to the top and we would do the same thing with the same driver. So what we will do is we will remove the driver information that we already processed here, and we will say that, okay, now we are done with it, and we don't have to do that once more. Hold on, I accidentally added some. There we go, shouldn't be there. And then we will remove the current driver from our list. So it will run until the list is empty or we have run out of spawn points. Okay, so now we can save this and go back and try it in Unity. So now we can see that we have spawned a car, and it's our Play 1 car, and we can drive it around with the keys. So that part of our code is working. Now we want to change how our player selection works. So let's go to UI and select Car UI Handler and open that in Visual Studio. So if we scroll down to our car selection, so on select car, we are adding things to player prefs, and we are not going to do that anymore. We're going to use our driver info that we have created, and we're going to use our list in Game Manager instead. But our list is actually private, so it's not public here. So even though we are making a short and simple tutorial, let's do it a little bit proper anyway. So we'll comment driver information handling here, and we need a way of adding things to our list. We already actually get a driver list here, but anyway, let's do it the other way. So we'll add a public function called add driver to list, take in player number, name, car unique ID is AI, and then we'll add it to the list. But this information is persistent, so we need to make sure that if the game is running and we are in this car selection and we are selecting cars, and then we have completed the race and maybe we go out to the menu again, then we can't just keep on adding things to the list because it will be full of drivers after a while. So we need a way of actually clearing that information as well. So let's add a function for that as well. Clear driver list. So we'll do a clear of that, and we'll do driver info clear. So that will remove all the elements in the list. So if we now look at our select UI car handler, we first of all, when we are starting the selection, or when we have selected, we want to clear the list. So let's do a clear driver list, and then we want to add our player. So this assumes that our player P1 is going to be the first player or the first driver in the list, and then we'll use car data, selected car index, and get the car unique ID. So that's all cool. If you will have multiple human players, then of course you need a different selection screen and handle that. But you do the same thing and just set the cars to not being AI. And then we want to be able to create unique AI drivers. So they shouldn't look the same as our player's car. So let's create a new list of cars. So we'll do the same thing that we did before with the driver information. We will take our unique cars, we'll call it unique cars, and we will create a new list, and it will take it as a copy from our car datas. And then we will, to make sure that it's a unique car that is picked by the AI, we are going to remove the car that the player has selected from this list. Then we only have left in the list is the players or the cars that nobody has selected. And then as well, one of the things that was requested was that we should have names for the drivers. So let's do names. So let's add a few names: Freddy, Eddie, Teddy, Buddy, Luddy, and Puddy. So those are unique names. Great. Then we want to add our AI drivers. So let's do a for loop so that we can control exactly how many are going to be created. And we'll do a for loop from 2 to until we reach the number 4, which is below 5. So that should add hopefully 3 AI cars. And then we want to have a name for our AI driver. So let's do a string driver name. We'll take our unique car name or unique names, and then we'll take a random value from 0 until the length of the this list. So it can't go outside of this list, and it will return a random name. Okay, Then we want to figure out a unique car as well. So let's make sure that, or actually before we do that, let's remove the name that we have already used here. So we'll do a unique names, remove that driver name. So it means that if it has picked Eddie as the random name, it will delete this from the list and the others will remain. So then we can ensure that no driver will have the same name. Okay, now we look at the car data. So we'll pick a car data based on unique cars, and the same thing, we'll take a random car. And since we don't have a lot of cars right now, we're not going to remove it, because then we will run out of cars. So for now we're going to do that, but if you want your AIs to have unique cars, then you would do the same thing as you do here, just remove it from the list. Alright, so now we are ready to actually add our driver. So let's do a game engine instance add driver to list. We'll use the value I, which starts at 2 and loops up to 4. We'll supply the driver name, the car unique ID, and we'll say that it's going to be an AI driver. Alright, so let's save that, and everything else should hopefully be fine. So let's go back into Unity. Oh, I need to save my game manager as well. So let's change our scene to our menu scene and take it for a spin. Alright, so my buttons have disappeared for some reason. Need to check out why. It shouldn't look like this on your end, hopefully. So let's select our car, and now we have 3 AI cars that are yellow, and they are called Lottie, Eddie, Freddy. So that's all good. And let's do it again and see, maybe we can get some different looking cars. If we take a red car here, yeah, now we had luck with the randomization, so we can see that the red car is our P1, and then we have our Lottie, Eddie, and Puddy drivers here. So that's working. I'm gonna check out why my buttons have disappeared, and I'll be right back. Okay, so the reasons why my arrows have disappeared for some reason is that Unity has decided that they don't fit inside here, so they're getting truncated. So let's just change it to overflow, and we're all done. So that works good. Not sure why it thinks it's overflowing, but maybe the font is actually a little bit bigger than I thought. Alright, so let's save that. So next thing that we're going to add is the ability for cars to remember their position. So if somebody finished first, they should start at the first position of the grid. If we go into our scripts, we know already that the position handler is the script that is keeping track of the positions of the car. So that's logical to add this part of the code. So let's open that in Visual Studio. So let's scroll down, and we have on pass checkpoint, which will happen when the car is passing any checkpoint. We want to check here if a car has completed its race. And we'll do that with a regular if statement. So we will check if car lap counter is race completed. But it doesn't have a function for that yet. So we need to add that to our car lap counter. So hold on left control, click car lap counter, which will open the car lap counter here. And we have our is race completed, but it's a private variable, so it's not exposed, so we need to expose that. So let's make a public bool is race completed, and we'll return is race completed. So now our position handler should be happy with it. That's perfect. So once we have done that, we need to be able to set information about our player. And the first thing that we need to do is understand what player is this that has completed its race. So we need to know the player number, because that's the sort of unique key that we're using for this. So let's take the player number. We'll get it from the car lap counter. We'll get the car input handler that has a public variable called player number. Then we know what player it is. And then we want to set information about this. And once again, we are not exposing any method to it, but we will shortly. So let's go into our game manager instance, set driver's last race position. We'll supply the player number and the car position. So if we go into our game manager, we need to add this as a function. The problem is that we are supplying the car or the player number, and it's a complete list, and we don't know which player it is, so we need a way of getting that information. So let's add a helper function for this, and we will not make it into a public variable because we're just going to use it here. Okay, so we are using find driver info, or we call it find driver info. We'll supply it with a player number. Then we need to loop through our list and find that driver. So we'll go through all of them, and we are checking, okay, is our player number equal to driver info player number? If it is, then we have found it and we are happy and we can return it. But if we go through the whole list and we haven't found it, it means that for some reason we are missing this driver. So let's add a debug log error, find driver info based on driver number, failed to find driver for player number, and then we'll add player number. And then we will return null in that case, because we don't have anything to return. Okay, so that's the first step. Now we wanted to set the player's last position. So let's add a public function for that, and it takes in the player number and the position. Then we need to find the driver first. So let's do a driver info is equal to find driver info player number. Then we have our driver here, and if it's null, it's going to throw an error. So that's fine, because we're writing this error first. All right, so then we are taking our driver info, the last race position, and setting it to its position. So if we store that now and go back into position handler, the error went away. So then we need to look at our spawn cars, because that's responsible for which car is spawned at what place. And now there is an issue that we need to consider, and that's with our spawn points. So our spawn points are using game object, find game objects with tag spawn point, and they have different names. So I think the first one is like spawn point, and the other one is spawn point 1, 2, 3, 4. The problem with this is when we're using find game objects with tag, it doesn't guarantee that we get the same order as we actually see in the editor. So the spawn points in here will be random. And that's why we can see already that the drivers, when it's starting, it's not starting at position 1, actually it's starting somewhere else. So we need to actually sort this list. We cannot rely that Unity has done this for us. So we need to make sure that it's in the correct order, because otherwise we can't really know that we're spawning the car that should go into first position into the first slot of the start grid if the first slot of the start grid is at the last position. So we need to sort that out, and we'll use link for this, and it's not that tricky actually. So what we are going to do is we're going to take our spawn point here, and we are converting it into a list, and then we're ordering it by the name. So it will be in ascending order. So it means that if the first spawn point is called 1, it will be first, and then the second one will be 2, 3, 4, etc. If you want it the other way around, then you need to order it by descending. Okay, so now we have sorted out our the spawn points. Now we need to do the same thing for the driver info. So if you look at our driver info, we're just getting the list. But we need to sort it based on the last position, right? So we'll do the same thing again. Let's take our driver info list, which is this one. We order by, and then last race position, and we'll do a two-string. Or two list, I mean, sorry. And that will return a list that is ordered in the based on this last race position, and it will order by the first item will be the player that finished first, second, etc. So let's save that, and that actually takes care of our well, the problem where we have the different that it should remember the different positions that the cars had. So let's save and go back into Unity and try it out. So we'll start it up, and we'll take the red car, and I'm first now, so I'm the red car here, and I'm gonna finish last so that we can see that it actually works. Alright, so here we can see Lottie was first, Teddy, Freddy, and P1. So let's race again, and now we can see that, oh, hold on, I'll just pause it, and we can have a look at P1, and it's actually up here. So the reason why it's there is because our spawn points. So let's look at our spawn point here, and it's this spawn point that is the first one. This one has the name spawn point 1, so that will be the second one. And then the second one is here. I would thought it would be here, but it's actually here. And the last one is here, and I finished last. So I'm at the correct position. So our code is actually working now. So let's race again, and let's try to become, well, I don't know, second or something like that. So just push around the other cars a bit, get them out of the way. Oop. And this could be a completely different game. Try to finish it in a certain position. Ah! No, I'm not sure. Did I finish last? I managed to finish last again. All right, let's try it. Let's try it again. That was unlucky. And there we go. Okay, now they're skipping on top of each other, which is not good. Alright, let's see. Maybe I can do it this time. Ooh, third. Well, that's good. So let's race again, and I'm at the position which is the third position. So it's all working. So that's good. Now we want to be able as well to keep track of our championship points. So again, we'll go into our position handler because it knows which position we finished at. So let's open that in Visual Studio. And then we will do it in the same way, that if a car has completed a race, then we can give them championship points. So our championship points, let's call it championships points awarded, and we will do it in a sort of quite easy fashion. The first car is going to get the most points. The second car is going to get 1 point less, etc., until we reach the last car. So what we need to do in order for that to work is we need to figure out how many cars are spawned. So I already know that there are 4 cars spawned, so I can take 4 minus car position. So if we are finishing first, then it will be 4 minus 1, which is 3 points. If we are second position, it will mean 4 minus 2, and yeah, so that will give us 2 points. Now we probably want to make this into a more dynamic fashion, so we want to know how many cars have been spawned, and our spawn handler or spawn cars knows this. So we need to add a variable to keep track of how many cars we have spawned. So let's add that, and we'll make it an integer number of cars spawned. So when we are spawning a car here, we want to make sure that we are adding to this. So let's do a number of cars spawned plus plus. That will add 1 to that variable. And then we need to have a way of getting this private variable. So let's do a public int get number of cars spawned and number of cars spawned. So let's go back into our save it, go back into our position handler, and now we can use this instead of our for here. So we will get our script. So we will do that by find object of type spawn cars, get number of cars spawned, and subtract the car position from that. Okay, so now we have done that, and we want to add that information in the same way that we have this set driver's last position. So let's do a game manager instance, add points to championship, player number, and how many points they have been awarded. But this does not exist yet because we haven't created it. So let's go into our game manager, or actually we can save that and go into our game manager, and we need to have a look at, okay, where are we going to add this information. I think we can add it after this point. So let's do a new function for that, add points to championship, player number, points. And then we do it the same way as we did with this information. So we are fetching our driver's information based on the player number. And then we are taking our championships points, and we're going to add whatever points we received here to it. Now, we're not going to make a UI for this. You can look at the position handlers, the UI handler for that, and make the same thing for championships points. But to know that it actually works, let's press F9, add a breakpoint here. And then let's open up Unity. Hold on, where is my Unity? There we go. And let's try it. So we have our car here. Let's select our red car, and we'll take it for a spin. And now everybody has 0 points in their championship. And let's just race like a crazy man and just complete this very quickly. Alright, so now we have our leaderboard, and one thing we need to make sure is that the cars actually finish, because unless they have finished, they will receive 0 points. So our race over screen, maybe if you have a championship mode, we need to wait until all the cars finished, or like I did it in Total Arcade Racing, I added the ability to speed up the time. So when all players have finished, you can press a button and the race moves a lot faster. But it also has actually a timer. So it counts down, I don't remember the exact time, maybe 20 seconds. So unless all the players have finished in 20 seconds, it's actually going to break and stop that race, and the champions or the cars will get 0 points that haven't finished. And that's just in case something gets stuck in the course and can't finish the race. Then you don't want to have the player have to exit and stop the whole game, because it's not fair to them. Alright, so let's go into Visual Studio, and we have our level start breakpoint here. So let's go debug, attach Unity debugger, and let's take our project here. And then let's go back into Unity, press race again. So now we have stopped our game here, and we can have a look at our driver info list. So if we click this, we see a little bit error here, arrow, And we can see that, okay, we have 3 or 4 elements. So we have driver info, car unique ID 0, championship points 3, that's me, is AI false, last race position 1, and play 1. And then we can have a look at the second one, which is championship points 2, is AI, last race was 2, and he was Freddy. And yeah, then we can look at the other ones, championships points 1, etc. So from this we can know that it's actually working as it should. So we can stop our code from running and press F9 to remove the breakpoint again. So let's save this and again go back into Unity. Then we wanted a lap counter. So let's go and look at how our game works now. So we have course 1 here. And if you look at the game, we have leaderboard, race over. So let's take our lap timer here and we'll replicate it and use it for a lap counter that we'll place here. So let's open our in-game canvas and let's actually look at the scene. We'll take it down a little bit, the leaderboard, so it's not at the same position as that one. And then we have our time canvas, so let's duplicate that. We'll take the position, but hold on, we'll move it off, and it's actually attached to the top right, so let's attach it to the top left, and it should be on the same position. So let's look at what it was, 238. Here we have it, 238. All right, so now it's at the same distance. And we don't want it could be called time canvas, but rather lap canvas. And we have our lap text. And then let's get rid of our race time UI handler here, remove. And it should look a little bit different. So it should say like lap 1 out of 4. And maybe we need to make the background a little bit, or the whole thing a little bit bigger, 320. So it gets a little bit on 30. All right, I think that looks all right. Then we need our script to handle it, and we will use the same method as we have used with our time. So we have a race time UI handler here. So let's go into UI, create a new script, and we'll call it lap counter UI handler instead. And let my computer process that for a while, and then take the lap counter and attach it. And let's save our in-game canvas. And let's open our lap counter UI handler in Visual Studio. So let's use Unity engine.ui, and then we need our text, the lap text, and let's actually get that in our awake function. We don't need a start function. So lap text get component text, because it's sitting right on the text, so it will find it. And we don't need it updating all the time, but rather only update whenever we feed it a new value. So let's do a public set lap text, and then we'll take in the string and we'll set that. Then we need as well to go into our car lap counter, because this knows how many laps a car has passed. So there are different ways of course, counting laps, and especially when we have AI. Should we be counting the first car, even if it's an AI, or should we only be counting the player's car? And I usually count the player's car, because that's like the important information. What position does the player have? And in our case, we only have one player, but if you have multiple players, then you need to figure out which car is actually first and take that information. But for now, we have it quite easy. So we only have one player, so let's use that. So we'll get our component, lap count UI handler. So let's cache that. And then when we are, hold on, we need to look, okay, we don't even have a start function. So let's add that. So when we are starting up, we want to check that, okay, are we a player or an AI? So we're a player. And in that case, we want to find our lap counter UI handler. So we'll use find objects of a type, and then we'll supply that. And then when we are starting up, we want it to actually say something. So let's add that, set lap text, and we'll use lap and then the variable laps completed +1 and laps to complete. And the reason why we're doing laps completed +1 is because laps completed starts at 0. But when you're racing, we're not saying that we're racing the 0 lap, we're racing the first lap. So that's why it should be 1 when we're starting. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And then when we are completing a lap, we need to update this as well. So let's have a look at, okay, when we have passed our finish line, then we want to check if, hold on, we can keep that as it is. So we want to check, is race completed? Because we don't want it to count over that, and we don't have to keep counting once the race is completed. And we want to make sure that the lap counter UI handler is not null, because it will be null on the AI players. So if it isn't, then let's just update it. Actually, we don't need an angel brackets there. All right, so let's set lap text, lap, the same thing that we had before. Okay, so let's save that and try it in Unity. So let's actually start up from our menu, so we get some AI cars as well. And then we'll press the play button here. And I will pick our red car, and I'm the first one here. So let's drive. And actually I'm gonna let the yellow one pass me so that we know that, oh, actually I'm gonna let all of them pass me. All right. So it's not updating until I past that finish line, which is great. And yeah, now it should not go to 3, which is great. So race over, leaderboard is updated. We have the championship points counting, and yeah, we can also keep track of where the car should start next time. I'd like to give a shout out to our Patreon supporters. It helps us with every single contribution that we can get. So please consider supporting us on Patreon. The link is in the description. This concludes this episode, and I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and the bell to get a notification when the next video is out. Example from our game, Total Arcade Racing, which uses this component for its physics, inputs and other parts. You can find the game on Steam, PlayStation, Xbox and Nintendo Switch. Please take it for a spin if you want to.